Alright, so this is my third time trying to record this video, and if something goes wrong this time, I'm straight up convinced that ghosts of Girl Scouts past are just not willing to let me put this video on the internet. Hey dweebs, Brooke here, and for today's video I thought I'd do another story time with Brooke. This story takes place roughly 8 years ago when I was 12 years old and I went to my first ever week-long Girl Scout camp. It wasn't a full week, it was 6 days and 5 nights, but whatever. It was still the longest time that I had ever spent away from home. A few of my fellow Girl Scouts and I had gone through the packet of all the different activity-centric camps that you could do, and I wanted to do horseback riding, and I even wanted to do the sports one, which is a joke in itself. But all of my friends, which really when I say all of my friends I mean 2 of them, because only 2 other Girl Scouts in my troop were actually going, but anyway. They wanted to go to a camp called Tough Girls Trek, which already just sounds like a horror story. If you told me today that I was going to a camp called Tough Girls Trek, I'd slap you across the face because there's no way I'd be able to handle it. But back then I was super excited about it. My friends and I all signed up to be in the same tent, which, by the way, I didn't know this until I got there, but our campground was the only one out of the whole place that didn't have a cabin, and that was only tents. Upon arrival, I discovered that my friends actually got put in a different tent, and I got stuck with 3 completely random girls who were 14 while I was 12, and it doesn't really seem like a big deal, but when you're 12 and you meet somebody who has the word teen in their age, you're just dumbstruck. Those girls were 3 different Beyoncés to me, okay? I kind of just assumed that they had done and seen everything. I felt like they knew everything. I was very intimidated by them. They ended up being really nice. The older girls at that camp were actually fairly protective over me. Most of them were. Some of them were. We'll get to the rest of the girls later. It was awkward though because it was my first time interacting with girls who were in that age group. And since we would all be spending 5 nights clumped together in a small space, obviously we tried to get to know each other. If I remember correctly, one of the first questions they asked me, believe it or not, was whether or not I had my period, but they didn't phrase it like that. They actually asked me if I had experienced my time of the month yet, and I had no idea what that meant, but I didn't want them to know that I didn't know, so I was just like, oh, what do you mean time of the month? I know what you mean, but I just need you to clarify for me because I need to make sure that you know. Dumbest response I've ever had to anything ever in my entire life. It was also my first time ever having to change in front of other people. I guess I had changed a couple times in front of friends, but that was when you spent one night over, so you didn't really have to worry about stripping completely naked. This you had to completely naked, because obviously you had to change your bra and your underwear and all that fun stuff. And if I'm being completely honest with you, I think I only changed my underwear twice that whole trip. I know it's disgusting and I know it's awful, but I was only 12 years old and I was so scared of them seeing too much, and it was also my first time seeing another human being naked because they weren't as shy about hiding their bodies as I was, and it was just a shock. But anyways, sleeping was, I honestly don't think we slept that much at all, and I don't mean in we stayed up all night gossiping and talking about boys. That's not how it went down at all. The first day that we were there, the counselors basically told us that we had a camp mascot whose name was Seymour the Skunk. They told us that if Seymour happened to, crawl into our tents at night, not to freak out because then he would freak out. And they didn't specify it, but anybody who's anybody knows that if you freak out a skunk, he's gonna spray. So already we were terrified of a skunk coming into our tents at night. And then once night actually falls, you realize that you're in the middle of the woods in a tent with only 3 other girls who probably can't really defend you from anything. The counselors themselves were probably 18 years old, if even, so it's not like they were gonna fight off any bears or Bigfoots. We were on constant high alert for anything that even remotely sounded like a twig snapping or leaves rustling. We were just prepared for all of it, and by prepared I mean we were ready to run out in our sleeping bags screaming. We were ready to trip and fall and roll down the giant ass hill that we had to walk up to get to our campground. We were not ready to die, but we were ready to run away looking like idiots. I think it was either the first or second night there that the girl who was sitting in the bed across from me was so terrified that she curled up into a fetal position, which you can't really see on this camera, but she wrapped her arms around her shoulders and she just started going I don't want to be a tough girl anymore. I miss my mommy. I want to go home. I know it, like, that moment doesn't seem like much because I was the one doing it and I'm me, but can you imagine being 12 years old watching a 14-year-old do that? And it wasn't like fake. It was watching somebody have an actual breakdown induced by fear. Needless to say, it didn't make me feel any better. I think we stayed up most of the nights crying, literally crying at each other. And I remember one night we got yelled at, like our whole tent got yelled at. We got called out by name individually to stop talking. Let me tell you, counselors of Girl Scouts past, we were not talking, okay? We were crying. We weren't enjoying ourselves, okay? We were terrified that if we stopped talking, something would come into our tents and kill us. One night, down by the bathroom, which, by the way, I don't have any memory of ever using because it was so far away from our tent and there was no way in hell I was using it at night. I guess there was like a fox in pain or something, and I don't know if you've ever heard a fox scream, but it sounds like a woman screaming. None of the counselors came to explain to us what was going on. We only found out what had happened the next morning. We were all just forced to sit there, frozen in terror, listening to what we thought was a human being dying. Then, I don't know what this bug is called specifically, but it looks like a giant mosquito. I now know that it's not a mosquito. I don't even think it's in like the mosquito family. Does a mosquito have a family? It's a bug that I've seen like a million times since then, but this was my first time really seeing one, and it was in our tent, and it was like right in the corner, and I thought it was gonna come get me, and I just need you to imagine, boom, okay, this bug and me making eye contact, me thinking it was gonna come down and like jab its mouth in my neck and just suck me dry, me mentally preparing myself for the moment when it would fly down and I would hit it away, but also having the fear that maybe if I hit it away it would retaliate and stick whatever its mouth is called through my hand, and it would just be through my hand and I'd have to live my life with a giant mosquito looking thing stuck through my hand. Just to make everything worse, it was freaking the middle of summer. It was like 90 degrees, but we had all brought sleeping bags and we all brought like long sleeves because we were told to bring those things because it was tough girls trekking. You had to be tough. You had to be a tough girl. You had to be trekking through the woods. You had to wear long sleeves and long pants and hiking boots even while sleeping. Not the hiking boots, but basically everything else. And nobody wanted to not sleep in their sleeping bags because in general you just have that fear of like limbs being out over the mattress and something grabbing you from under the bed. Like no matter what age you are, I think that's a fear people have. So I honestly think that I sweat enough to form another person. There is another version of 12-year-old me out in the world made completely of sweat, just living life. Over the course of the 6 days that we were there, we did a lot of different activities. We went hiking, we made food outside, we did a bunch of dumb shit that I will probably never ever do again ever in my life because who needs to cook food outside when it's indoors, ovens. But I think it was like every day or every other day we had to go swimming in the lake, and I was super excited because even now I love swimming. But when you are a Girl Scout, if you can't do certain swim moves like, you know, the butterfly, the backstroke, the front stroke, whatever, I don't fucking know what those things are called, you can't leave the shallow end. At that point in my life, I don't even think I was a very good like doggy paddler. I don't think I knew how to like tread water, so there was no way in hell I was ever gonna be in the deep end. And I remember the first time that we went in the lake, it wasn't like I wasn't alone. There was like me and two other girls in the shallow end, but after that time it was just me in the shallow end. Just me. I was the only person who couldn't do like the freaking butterfly stroke or doggy paddle or tread water or any of that dumb shit that really just throw me in the lake, just let me drown. I would rather, you know, die than be the embarrassment that I was in my bright yellow swim cap being unable to swim in the deep end with the rest of the girls. From that, I'm sure you can imagine I wasn't very popular amongst my peers. And while the older girls were protective of me, I really wouldn't say that they were my friends. They kind of just, you know, had my back. Like one time we were hiking and I fell and they rushed me. They were the first people there for me, making sure I was okay, making sure I could stand up properly. The counselors, on the other hand, were just like, did you break any bones? And when I said no, they were like, okay, good, and they just kept walking. But this leads me to the shower part of the story, and this leads me to the most horrific thing that had ever happened to me. Let's just get it done over with. Let's just say it out loud. So we had to walk like a fairly far distance to get to the showers. I think we only took a shower, I think we only walked to the showers like twice over the course of the 6 days. And I don't know if that was part of like Tough Girls Trek or like maybe because we were younger and we didn't sweat as much. I don't really know why we only showered like twice, I don't know. But the showers were extremely dirty. It was like a cement room, and the only thing like separating the showers were really cheap curtains, like ones that didn't even touch the floor, so like you could still see people's feet. I remember there was a toad in one of like the shower stalls, so I was like, oh, I'm not gonna go in that stall, I'm gonna go in the one next to it. The fucking toad naturally crawls under, not crawls, it hops under the freaking makeshift curtain thing into my shower stall. So I'm standing there in the corner where barely any water is hitting me while the toad takes up the whole thing because I didn't want to be anywhere near it. And it was fucking huge too. It was like this goddamn big. It was like the size of my whole room. And I remember I was so against being naked in front of these girls that I didn't know that I started like a movement. I was like, I'm going to shower in my bathing suit. I don't care what anybody thinks about that. I don't care if it's weird. And all these other girls were like, yeah, me too, me too. And then the older girls started a rumor that the counselors weren't gonna let us shower in our bathing suits, and I really don't know if it was true or not, but I believed it because I'm an idiot. I really should have just asked the counselors. I mean, it sounds like you wouldn't get clean washing under a bathing suit, but I would rather be a little less clean than have what happened. So yes, I had to get naked in front of these girls, and the changing situation was weird. It was like you walked out of the shower and everybody put like dressed and undressed like in the middle of the whole thing. So it was like there's like you walk out and boom, naked girl. Like there's just no way to avoid it. And I guess one of the older girls, like one of the older bitchy girls that I hated, I still remember her face. Nightmare inducing. I guess she saw my birthmark, which at the time was bright red, and I still have it. It's like a lump on my side, but it's not bright red anymore, and it's smaller. I think it's called a strawberry birthmark, but basically the red part of it made it look like a nipple, and the lump part, I guess, made it look like a boob. So she spread a rumor that I had a third boob. I had people coming up to me and asking me if it was true. I remember that I talked to like the nice older girls about it, and they were just like, oh, she shouldn't have done that, like that's so mean, don't let it get to you, blah blah blah. But how do you not let something like that get to you when you're 12 years old? In general, like what 14-year-old is so malicious that they feel the need to make somebody who is already very uncool feel worse about themselves? However, I was in a state of mind at that age where I just thought that I was like the coolest shit on earth, so I kind of embraced it. Like I remember I was sitting like on the like hill by the lake, and I was in my bathing suit, and I was just like, hell yeah, I'm Brooke, I'm the bitch with the third boob, what you gonna fucking do about it? The sad thing is though, I was just lying there by myself thinking these things. To finish off this story, the whipped cream on top of the goddamn melted ice cream sundae, there was the final night we slept completely outdoors in nothing but our sleeping bags, like in the middle of a giant ass field under the stars, which, it was actually pretty whatever, but it was just, we didn't have to do it. It was unnecessary. You're not tough because you can sleep outside, although after this experience, I feel like I could probably handle anything, even the zombie apocalypse. I ended up sleeping at like the edge of a group of the nicer older girls because at that point I wasn't like getting along with my friends because they just didn't want anything to do with me, and like the girls that I had kind of befriended during Girl Scout camp, I didn't like feel safe being with them. Like I wanted to be with the older girls because I felt like they could like kick the ass of whatever came at me. If like a deer came up and like tried to sniff my face, they'd be like, go away deer, and somehow their 14-year-old powers would make the deer go away. My voice is like pitching because I'm like getting so into this story. But anyway, I ended up not sleeping like at all, but I remember just as I was starting to fall asleep, I hear the screams of little girls dying, an entire cabin of girls screaming, okay? An entire cabin of girls screaming bloody murder like they were being ripped apart. That's probably an over-exaggeration, but we don't need to talk about that. You get it. You hear what I heard. And I knew it had to be this one specific cabin of girls because we were only that close to that cabin, and it sounded so close, and I was terrified. And I remember I tried waking up the girls around me, and I was like, guys, somebody's screaming, somebody needs help, like we have to wake up the counselors, and they're like, go back to bed, Brooke, you're just imagining things. No, I'm not fucking imagining things. You don't imagine one girl screaming and then all of a sudden the rest of them start screaming too. That just doesn't happen. At this point, I was like, fuck having a third boob, like, fuck everything everything else that has happened on this trip, this is the worst thing. Also, at one point in the mess hall, they had given us macaroni and cheese with chunks of ham in it, which I have never heard of in my entire life, and I definitely didn't eat it. I was not fucking with ham in my macaroni and cheese. I threw that shit away. Even that was not worse than this. The fear knocked me out, and I fell asleep. I literally... Maybe it was because I was so exhausted from not sleeping all of the other nights, and I was just done. I was just, like, accepting of the fact that death was coming, but I just zonked out. And when I woke up, I don't even think I talked about it. Or I talked about it, like, in a lighthearted way, like, yeah, I heard all these girls screaming last night, like, weird, right? I found out the next morning that one girl had woken up from a nightmare screaming, and then the whole cabin woke up screaming, and it really wasn't a big deal, obviously, but, like, I just... Put yourself in that situation. Like, even now, if I heard that, I don't know what I would do. I would piss my pants. I would not run to save those girls. I would just be gone. I know that's awful. Hopefully I would have my cell phone, which back then we weren't allowed to have any sort of electronics. I didn't have my cell phone anyway, because back then cell phones weren't a big deal, but I guess in reference to what I would do now, I'd probably just pull out my phone and call 911 without even thinking. So yeah, that was my experience with Girl Scouts when I was 12 years old. I hope you thought it was funny. I hope you don't find my past self too pathetic, because I definitely was pathetic, but I've gotten over it. I moved on, and I'd like to think I'm a little less pathetic now. Just a little bit less, though. Just a little bit less. I'm still me. Before I go, I just want to send a message to the bitch who started the third boob rumor. You are a third boob. You are just one giant third boob that is, like, saggy and gross, and nobody ever wants to touch or look at it, okay? You are the third saggy boob that everybody hates, okay? That's what you are. I don't remember your name. I doubt you'd ever find me. I think if you saw my face, you probably wouldn't recognize me, because it was, like, a million years ago, and I look completely different now. That's a lie. I still look like a 12-year-old. But anyway, this has been the second edition of Storytime with Brooke, which I have found I really enjoy doing. I like telling stories. I've had a really interesting life, and when I say interesting, I don't mean interesting in a good way. I just mean it in a way that I can sit down at a party and say that I have had these experiences, and nobody else can really relate to them. But until next time, I will see you later, dweebs.